at Klarna, we were like, as many other, I think, entrepreneurs and founders and founder-led companies, when you start a business, you're all about building a product, but then you start thinking about how do you organize yourself and all that. And then you look around and you read these books, like management books, like Good to Great, or all these different books. You're like, what do we do from that? And then you read in the newspaper, it says Google just launched 20% of creative time, which used to be a big thing, back in the days. And like, we have to do 20% of creative time for everyone, and we did that, and nothing happened. And we put Coca-Cola in the rooms, free Coca-Cola, ping pong tables, like, and Lego in the conference rooms. Like, we did it all, right? Like, we've been trying and testing all of the things that like you read in the press. Like,
you're reading too many management books, I think.
Exactly. That was my conclusion as well eventually, but it took some time to reach that realization.
Welcome to Leadership Next, the podcast about the changing rules of business leadership. I'm Michal Ivram.
And I'm Diane Brady. When I think about Klarna, I'm hard pressed to think of a bigger fan of generative AI, to the point where you actually put out a press release, I think in your first month, talking about how I think it was the equivalent of 700 full-time agents through ChatGPT. Talk about how transformative that has been for you.
I mean, I think it's amazing. First and foremost, I would like to say something, which is that I'm actually one of the people who are kind of skeptical about new technologies. And like, people have been asking me about crypto, obviously, for a lot of years. And I always said, like, if I can't convince my mom to use it, I don't understand the value of it. And so like, I never got my mom to understand why she would have a Bitcoin, and I still haven't convinced her.
But she does use Klarna.
But she does use Klarna.
Okay, there you go.
And so I think when GenAI came out, it was very clear from day one that this actually has practical application. We can use it, but it's difficult to get it to practical application because it's a new technology. You have to figure it out. And as much as you will see a lot of noise currently about people doing press releases about this and that, product launches, few things we have seen have actually come to like serious, results that have business impact. And so when we achieve that with the customer service experience, where actually the AI chat has a similar and many times higher customer satisfaction than people interacting with human agents, we felt that was quite an interesting data point. And we wanted to share that because at the same point of time, we feel a little bit that society is not necessarily, and politicians are not necessarily taking enough consideration to the implications it will have on jobs, which is why obviously sharing that 700 number, we knew it was somewhat controversial and it will create some, like, people would, they would, react to it. But at the same point of time, we said, look, in the short term, we hire big customer service companies. They have hundreds of thousands of employees. They're just going to, when we have less errands, they're going to send errands as well. These people will still have jobs. But in the longer term, in the few coming years, this will have severe and big implications for society. And we think it's time to think about that more proactively.
We understand you allowed Sam Altman from OpenAI to basically use Klarna like an AI sandbox. So I'm just curious to hear how that relationship started. Obviously, we're seeing OpenAI spark some really interesting partnerships. This is definitely one of them. So tell us about it.
When I tried it myself first in November, a little bit more than a year ago now, I was like, wow, this was like a Google experience back 20 years ago when I tried Google first time. But even better, I would say, to some degree. And like, it became very obvious to me that Sam and OpenAI would be a company that would be very hard to reach very soon and create relationships. So I was like, I better move fast before it's too late. So I made sure to get
on the calendar.
Yeah, exactly. Get on the calendar. I took a trip to San Francisco basically only to see Sam, and I managed to still. It was kind of funny because I think initially the meeting was 2 hours, and by the time I arrived, it was only 30 minutes. So it was kind of a good impression of like how fast OpenAI's calendar was shrinking due to the interest in the company. But I think the point, we had a meeting and I said, look, I want to be a great partner. And I know, afterwards I heard a little bit, they were like, really? A European bank? Are they going to be one of our most like forward-leaning partners? But since then, we created a joint Slack channel, and we've had like a lot of good interactions and like just testing and, saying, we want to try that, and provided a lot of like good, meaningful feedback to them about how the APIs work and what could be working better. And I think it's helped establish us as a good partner of theirs. There's such a mix in maturity of application and utilization of AI across companies. So you'll have everything from people like Klarna very much leaning in to like people that are still like, I'm not sure how this is going to work. And what about data? What about hallucinations? What about this and that? But for the people leaning in, there's a capacity issue. Like, there's a clear capacity issue where like there's not enough electricity. There's not a lot of, there's not a lot of processing power. And so like leaning in and making sure to be a customer that's actually, oh, we just want to buy, we want to make sure we're easy to work with, actually benefits us in that case, because it becomes easier to get, access to the processing power that we need. And so it's been very helpful for us. And I think it just allows us to stay slightly ahead of the curve, which is what we're trying to do.
You're the first person I know who's used the Toyota way applied to something that's not manufacturing. I think of tape on the floor and very kind of distinct modular management practices. To apply it to the financial services sector is really interesting.
Well, and I think it's very fun that you say that, because I'm not going to say which company this was, but I talked to one of the largest banks in the world, and their chairman is from the manufacturing industry. And he was quite disappointed that the bank that he was a chairman of wasn't like more applying these practices. I think to some degree, the thing with banking, right, which is interesting, and I think there was a research that showed that like banking is the only industry in the last 150 years that basically has zero productivity gains in the last 150 years, right? So like, as opposed to manufacturing, a lot of it have had a huge problem. And I think the reason for that is because we regulated banks so much, there's actually a very limited competition, to be fair. Like once you reach that size, the competition is actually quite limited. And so as a consequence, the excess wealth that is created has been distributed to the employees of the banks and the shareholders, right? Which is why we also used to have these tremendously high compensation. Now, after 2007, it's come down a little bit. And so there hasn't been that strong incentive. And as much as officially banks are so well regulated with policies and instructions, like in a lot of banks, those compliance parts live a parallel life to reality, which is also why we're still seeing things happening and things blowing up now and then. So I think that like really applying them in practice is actually an interesting challenge and has a lot of opportunity in itself.